Thank you, and enjoy. Who must move on several levels of scenery. It is also extremely annoying to other patrons of the theater. There will be an opportunity after the performance to take pictures. At this time, we would also ask audience members to please turn off any cellular phones or pagers you may have with you. In addition to them being very disruptive, there is also the possibility that your conversation could be broadcast over one of the wireless microphone frequencies used for this show. Thank you, and enjoy the performance.
This is a fairy story. The story of Cinderella and the four ugly corporation directors. Once upon a time, Cinderella went down to Wall Street, not in the golden coach drawn by 6 white horses, but in the IRT subway.
Order, please, order. The meeting will come to order. The 59th Annual Stockholders Meeting is hereby declared in session. Stockholders, that is, of the General Products Corporation of America. No doubt many of you are surprised to find me acting as chairman of this meeting. No more so than I. My seat has always been that of Mr. Metcalf's, rather where Mr. Metcalf was sitting. However, due to our great and irreplaceable loss, I have naturally, and legally too I'm informed, moved up one notch. Not that I shall ever be able to fill the place left vacant by Edward McKeever, Big Ed, as he was known to those who loved him. Edward McKeever made this company what it is today, one of the largest corporations in the United States. In his 19 years as president and chairman of the board, he saw your company grow until it now manufactures everything from pins to an automobile, from nail file to tractors and locomotives. Yes, I can safely say that if General Products does not make it, there's no money in it. Now I call upon your new president, acting president I should say, until you make him your new president, who will tell you what your board of directors proposes to do to honor our great former leader. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alfred Metcalf.
Thank you, Mr. Blessington. Yes, General Products lost a great man when the president called Ed McKeever down to Washington. You all know what happened down there. I'm sure that you read about it in the papers. Before they would give him his job, he was forced by the government to take a profit of $30 million in General Products stock. But did he hesitate? Only for a week or so. That's why we were going to send him this plaque. To Edward Leon McKeever, slag hauler, furnace feeder, assembly line worker, foreman, shop supervisor, plant manager, vice president, and for 19 years, president and chairman of the board of General Products Corporation of America, sent with gratitude and affection by labor, management, and capital. I would also like to add that in the good old days, I worked the slag pile with Ed McKeever, and no one ever slung as much slag as Big Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Metcalf. The chair will entertain the motion to have the plaque duly delivered to Mr. McKeever in Washington.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Voting 750,000 shares by duly authorized proxies, I say aye.
Opposed? Motion carried by acclamation. And now the report of your secretary, Ms. Jessica Gilly.
The stockholders will have found under their chairs a little blue booklet. Compendium of minutes of quarterly meetings of directors of General Products Corporation. As the stockholders know, the posts of chairman of the board and president of the company were both held by Mr. McKeever. In the new alignment, delegation of responsibility is as follows. T. John Blessington, from first vice president to chairman of the board. Alfred Metcalf, from second vice president to president of the company. Clifford Snell, from treasurer to administrative vice president and treasurer. Jessica Gilly, secretary, to remain as secretary. Respectfully submitted, Jessica Gilly, secretary.
Thank you, Ms. Gilly. Now anyone move for the adoption of Ms. Gilly's report?
Moved.
Second.
750,000 proxies vote aye.
Opposed? Carried. And now the report of the man you've really been waiting to hear from, your treasurer, Mr. Clifford Snell.
Thank you, Jack. Well, folks, I'm the belly will either like or dislike, depending on the size of the dividend check. And here's a report on how we did this year. I'm sure you've all found it under your chairs alongside Ms. Gilly's little booklet. It isn't as compact as Jessica's report, but then you can't do things with figures the way you can with words. Anyhow, suppose you and I kind of thumb through it together. Let's see. Page 11, just as one example. Page 11. Assets. $226,1,792,567.92. Now, I think that's pretty good, don't you?
Fine, Clifford, just fine.
Fine.
Let's see. Page 32. Inventory. Starts on page 32 and runs to page 57. And here you'll find a pretty complete list from raw stock in our Allegheny steel plant to the little cellophane price tags in our Denver merchandising rooms. Pages 161, 162, all the way up to 170. Gross profits, net gains, interest charges, dividend payments, and the like. Well, folks, that's the story. I might add that now, at long last, since we finally have an administration in Washington that understands business, our dividend this quarter will be slightly smaller. Of course, that is only temporary. The smaller dividend will be temporary, not the administration in Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Snell. Now, will anyone move for the adoption of Mr. Snell's report?
Moved.
Second.
Proxies vote aye.
It's moved and seconded that the report of your treasurer, Mr. Clifford Snell, be unanimously adopted. All those in favor? Oh, yes, madam, yes?
Oh, well, I'm sorry. It's nothing really.
Well, then you don't wish the chair to recognize you?
The chair?
I am the chair, madam.
Oh, I didn't
Do you
quite-
wish the chair to recognize you?
I did have something I wanted to ask, but,
Well, certainly, madam. What is it you'd like to know?
well, it's not exactly something I wanted to know. It's more of something I don't like.
Can't we get ahead with this, Jack?
Something you don't like. What is it?
Well, it's this.
You don't like Mr. Snell's report? All of it?
Oh, I don't mean all of it. I like the color.
Isn't this just a little ridiculous?
I'm sorry. I've never attended a stockholders meeting before. Maybe I'd better just sit down.
As you wish.
Thank you.
Now, there was a motion on the
On
floor.
the other hand, it says here that the salary for the chairman of the board next year will be $1,175,000. Tell me, is that true?
Well, wherever did you get a notion like that, Miss,
Mrs. Partridge. It's on page 96. Right here.
I see. Mr. Snell, as treasurer, would you care to answer that question?
Yes, certainly. Could I ask the question again, please?
Well, I don't want anyone to think I'm nosy. But is it true that the chairman of the board will get $1,175,000 next year? It seems such a lot of money.
In a company this size, that is not considered a large salary. Not a large salary at all. I believe that answers the question.
Yes. Now, there was a motion on
Well,
the
but
floor.
I'd be just awful if I asked another question. What exactly does the chairman of the board do?
My dear lady, as an attorney at law, I can assure you that the office of the chairman of the board is one prescribed by law. New York State Corporation Code, Section 23. We have very little to say about it. We're just obeying the law.
Oh, I'm sure of that. Only what does he do?
He presides over the board. The chairman of the board presides over the board of directors.
Now I understand. Thank you so much.
Not at all. We're always happy to
How
help.
often does he do that?
I beg your pardon?
Well, how often does he preside over the board?
Well, how often is that, Miss Gilly?
How's that?
How often does the board meet?
Well, 4 times a year, isn't it? 4 times every year.
That is also prescribed by law.
Well, now I know I'm asking a lot of questions, but how long do the meetings last?
Oh, several hours. At least several hours.
2 hours, would you say?
Yes, yes indeed. And then there's the annual stockholders meeting.
So that makes 5 times.
Excuse me, Jack. Mrs. Partridge. That's right, Partridge.
Yes, sir.
You understand this is a stockholders meeting.
Oh, yes.
You are a stockholder?
Yes, I have 10 shares. I've had them for a long time, only I've never come to a meeting before.
Your full name and address, Mrs.
Mrs. Laura Partridge, 226A, 18th Street, Jackson Heights, Long Island.
Paddington, Partridge. Mrs. Laura Partridge. 10 shares. Stock certificate number 189-73635.
Yes, I haven't got it with me. It's in my top bureau drawer.
Oh, you have many points on the agenda, so...
Well, 5 meetings a year. That makes 10 hours in all. You mean to say he gets $1,175,000 for just working 10 hours?
Not at all. The chairman of the board must be intimately conversant with every detail of the company at all times. It requires constant study, brain work.
It's a big job, Mrs. Partridge. A very big job. responsibilities to the company, to the nation, and in these times to the world.
Yes. Still, $1,175,000. And you're going to get $1,100,000, Mr. Snell?
And you don't think I'm worth $1,100,000, Mrs. Partridge?
Not if we can get somebody for less. You see, the reason I came here today. It says it's a good day to attend to financial matters.
I beg your pardon?
My horoscope. I'm Leo the Lion. It says, cultivate friends and attend to financial matters.
I see.
Mind you, I don't pay much attention to it. Now that I'm here, I'm much more interested in the salaries.
And we want you to be. Now, what is it you would like to know?
Well, it says that you used to get $175,000, and now it's going to be $1,175,000? That's $1 million more. Now, how much did you used to get, Mr. Snell?
Madam, that's not the point.
Oh, goodness, I know it isn't. But let's add it up, just for fun, shall we? May I borrow your pencil? Thank you. Now, how much did you say you used to get, Mr. Snell?
I don't recall that. You'll find everything in the report.
Oh, here it is, $100,000. I mean, to the ordinary person, 100,000, gracious.
This seems to me hardly a matter for...
Well, I don't mean to be a nuisance, but can just anybody make a motion?
Certainly, ma'am.
Good. I move the salaries are too big.
Mr. Chairman, please.
Mrs. Partridge, that is not quite the proper form for a motion. However, if someone seconds it, do I hear a second to Mrs. Partridge's motion?
I second it.
Madam, you cannot second your own motion.
Why not? I'm for it.
It's a matter of parliamentary law.
I don't care what they do in Parliament. I think the salaries are too big, and some of us here ought to form a stockholders committee.
A committee?
A committee? To look into the salaries of our company's directors. And until we come back with our report.
I object, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Partridge, I do not believe this is the
Because
time
I've
to...
known a lot of directors, and they don't get anything like that. So if the committee finds...
Mrs. Partridge, the chair has decided not to act on the motion of salaries today. The meeting's adjourned and someone will so move.
Move, second.
It's moved and seconded that the meeting's adjourned for 6 weeks. Opposed? Carried.
6 weeks. I can come.
That's splendid. Mrs. Partridge, would you remain a moment, please?
Me?
Well, if you please, I'd like to speak to you for a moment.
You're going to scold me. I know, I've behaved badly.
Why not at all, Mrs. Partridge? You showed very fine business sense.
Very fine.
I did?
So much so that I wonder if we couldn't use you here. I mean at General Products. How would you like to come work with us here?
What kind of work?
Well, I'm not sure exactly, but you seem to have a keen insight into business affairs.
Oh, but I've never worked in my life, Mr. Blessington. I'm an actress.
An actress?
Well, well. Hey, actress, would I have seen you on the stage?
Well, I don't know. Did you see the revival of Our Wilderness?
Ah, Wilderness. I believe so. You were the,
I was one of the women.
Oh, yes, of course.
I think I remember. Very good.
Yes. Mrs. Partridge, are you acting in a play now?
No, I'm not.
Well, then you would be free to associate yourself with us.
Are you sure she wants to come with us, Jack? Maybe she wouldn't like it.
Oh, I love it. What about salary?
Salary. Good question, Mrs. Partridge. How about $400 a week?
Well, I used to get equity minimum, which is $649 a week from the theater guild.
Well, Mrs. Partridge, we want you here with us. So what would you say to $750 a week?
750. Yes, that would be better. Thank you so much.
Well, then it's all settled. You report to me. That's on the 35th floor. Monday morning at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock?
Would you rather come at some other hour?
Well, in the theater, we don't generally start until 11.
11 would be quite agreeable. That's Monday at 11.
Yes, that's fine. Wait a minute. I can't start Monday. It says it's a bad day for me to go out, see?
Tuesday then?
Tuesday. Start new enterprises. It's perfect. And it's the 17th. That's my lucky number. You know, you want to get one of these.
Well, Mrs. Partridge, maybe we can use yours.
Certainly. Because whoever picked the time for this meeting, well, it wasn't a very good day for you, was it? Well, goodbye until Tuesday.
Cinderella went to work for the four ugly corporation directors at $750 a week. But in one respect, Cinderella was just like the rest of us. They soaked her for withholding tax, workman's compensation tax, personal property tax, state income tax, city tax, county tax, unemployment tax, hospitalization tax, social security tax, and social insecurity tax.
I want to emphasize one thing, Miss Shockraven. Mrs. Partridge's activities on behalf of his company must be very slight. It is your job to see that she does very little or nothing. Is that clear?
You'll find me most cooperative, Mr. Snell.
And we understand each other. You will report to me if anything unusual happens.
May I ask, how long will Mrs. Partridge be with us?
Here we are. You remember Mr. Snell, of course.
Yes, indeed.
Good morning, Mrs. Partridge. This is your secretary, Miss Shockraven.
How do you do, Mrs. Partridge?
Good morning, dear. My, the business world is fascinating. I know I'm going to love it. Only, you gentlemen haven't told me what I'm supposed to do.
Well, Mrs. Partridge, you will be the director of stockholder relations.
How
I'd
nice.
hoped you'd like it.
What is it?
Well, Mrs. Partridge, we have a great many stockholders, many of them women like yourself who just put a few shares. It will be your job to keep them happy, make friends for the company.
I see. Will they be coming in?
Oh, no, we hope not. But occasionally we do receive a few letters from them, and it will be your job to answer them.
Is that all I'm to do?
Well, Mrs. Partridge, that's quite a lot. There are over 4 million stockholders.
My.
Jack, the meeting on short-term debentures is set for 11:30.
Right. Well, good luck, Mrs. Partridge.
Thank you. Goodbye.
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 How soon is lunch?
How's that?
What's this?
It's a microcassette recorder. On evenings that you work late and choose not to keep me on overtime, you use that for your dictation. Then I transcribe it the following morning.
I've heard of these. Those rich actors use them to write their memoirs.
Simply pick up the recorder and press that button. Do you have something to say?
I don't know. The quality of mercy is not strict. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven.
The quality of mercy is not strict. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven.
Partridge,
This is Mrs. Partridge's office.
Jenkins, incoming mail. How do you spell that name?
P-A-R-T.
R-I-D-G-E.
First name?
Laura.
Yours or hers?
Mrs. Laura Partridge.
Okay, room 2762. Any mail comes, you'll get it.
Shall we begin?
Yes. Begin what?
Begin work.
Oh, yes. Where are the letters from the stockholders?
I haven't seen any, Mrs. Partridge.
But Mr. Blessington just said,
He said if any should come in.
oh. Well, then what do we do? Just wait?
Your schedule is clear until 11:55. At that time, all executives are required in the main lobby for the unveiling of a bust of Mr. McKeever.
Well, that'll be interesting. Do you always wear your hair that way, dear?
I do.
There's a little hairdresser up on 53rd Street.
Please, Mrs. Partridge, not during business hours.
I'm sorry.
Good morning, Mrs. Partridge.
Good morning, Miss Gilly.
Mrs. Partridge, we're giving a dinner next week to honor Mr. Blessington on his promotion to chairman of the board. We'd be so pleased if you would attend. Tickets are $100 a plate.
$100? What are you having for dinner?
Mrs. Partridge, that's not the point.
The hell it isn't.
Oh, well, excuse me. Thank you.
were weak.
You were about to dictate.
Oh, yes. Do you have a boyfriend? I suppose you must have a lot of boyfriends. Tell me about that.
Please, Mrs. Partridge, I must insist upon a business relationship. Either you must dictate, or I shall have to leave the office.
I'm sorry. Now, whom can I... Oh, I know. Dear Eddie.
But whom is it going to?
To Eddie.
But first, you must give me his full name and address, and then you can begin, Dear Eddie.
But that's all the name he has. Eddie. And I don't know his address.
Well, then how will it reach him?
I'll just put it in the milk bottle. Dear Eddie, please do not leave the half pint of cream every morning, as I will not be home for lunch anymore. Just leave it every other day. Thank you. Mrs. Partridge. Hello?
Mrs. Partridge? Mrs. Partridge's secretary speaking. Who would like to speak with Mrs. Partridge? One moment, please. I'll see if she's in.
I'm in.
What would he like to speak with Mrs. Partridge about?
I haven't anything to do. Isn't it all right if I just talk to him?
Not to a theatrical agent, Mrs. Partridge.
Theatrical agent? Who's this? Tom Lynch? How on earth did you find me? Oh, yes, my answering service. Yes, I am working again. No, I've quit the theater. $750 a week. Why, I don't see why you should get 10% of that, Tom. Fine. Take me off your list. You haven't gotten me a job in 6 years, not even modeling.
Why, Mrs. Partridge, I didn't know you'd been in the theater. It must have been terribly exciting, especially in the old days.
The old days, Miss Shopgraven, were strictly NG. That means no good. Rehearse for 10 weeks without pay, go on the road, and the company manager would make off with the receipts. That happened to me once. And the worst of it was that I was married to him. That was the last time I saw him. Oh, except at the funeral. Poor Harry. Now, Miss, what's that name of yours again?
Shotgraven. Amelia Shotgraven.
Oh, I'd change that if I were you.
Tell me some more of your stories while you were acting.
Not during business hours, Miss Shotgraven.
Quite right.
Sorry. Now, Miss Shotgraven, is there any way of finding out some of the names of the stockholders?
Well, there's always the stockholders directory.
Could you bring it to me, please? Thank you.
This is rather irregular, Mrs. Partridge.
Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas. I don't want anybody from Arkansas. We starve to death there. Louisiana, Maine, Maryland. We did good business in Maryland. Take a letter, Miss Shotgraven.
A letter, Mrs. Partridge?
Yes.
To a stockholder?
Mr. Blessington told me to make friends. Ready? Mrs. Emily Woodbury. That's a friendly name, don't you think? 216 Fremont Street, Hagerstown, Maryland. 25 shares. That's not too many. 25. So she can't be rich. Dear Mrs. Woodbury, my name is Laura Partridge, and I am a woman just like yourself. Except that you probably have a husband and children, and I haven't. However, I am helping out at General Products these days, just making suggestions. But I'm sure you have some suggestions too. Just little homey ones about their stoves and sewing machines and things. Or perhaps you'd like them to invent something. Because we have a lot of inventors here, and they haven't anything to do all day except invent. Hoping to hear from you soon. Do they have all that written down, dear?
Yes, Mrs. Partridge.
Good. You type that out, and I'll look through for more places and names that sound good. More. Massachusetts. Minnesota. Mississippi.
Corporation directors were having a wonderful time. They were running the company all over the place. Twice a day, they watered the stock to keep it fresh, and every Saturday, they took a long pair of garden shears and trimmed the dividend. All in all, you couldn't find a nicer bunch of fellows outside of a police lineup.
Excellent, Miss Learier. Excellent. All right with you boys?
What's this?
Advertising department. She's a model. She's from the advertising department.
We're not making beachwear, are we?
It's not for beachwear, Jessica. It's for... What's that slogan again, Miss Learier?
I have my swimming pool dug by General Products Steam Shovel.
There you are. It's for steam shovels.
Oh! Then why don't they show a steam shovel?
Because nobody wants to look at a steam shovel. All right, Miss Learier.
Thank you. I've just been on the phone with Mr. McKeever down in Washington.
What?
I said I've just been on the phone with Mr. McKeever.
Stop for a minute, will you, Will? What are you doing anyhow? I'm making a table leg. Well, I wish you wouldn't do it while we're talking. Look, you have your hobbies and I have mine.
Yeah, but my hobbies don't irritate me.
Okay, don't be sore.
So what do you say?
Who?
McKeever, of course. What do you say?
Nothing in particular.
You mean you didn't take it up with them?
No.
Why not? Do you realize we haven't had a single government contract since McKeever took the job?
He's just leaning over backwards. That's all.
Do you know what corporate earnings are going to look like this year?
That'll come through for us. I've known that for 30 years.
Yeah, well, last December, our gross dealings with the government came to $100 billion. That's before McKeever went down there. Since then, nothing.
Hey, did I show you this gadget? I picked up in a novelty store. It's a pen that lights up so that you can write in the dark. See?
Is that what you do in the dark?
Well, I thought if you liked it enough, we might buy the patent and manufacture it ourselves.
Oh, yes. Excellent. What's the slogan this time?
My train is pulled by a General Products diesel engine.
The neck ain't right.
What?
The neck ain't right.
What's the matter with her neck?
Not her neck, the oil can's neck.
Oh,
Ought to be straight. A diesel oil can has a straight neck.
I'll send a memo to Wilcox on it.
Okay.
All right, Miss Learier.
Thank you, Mr. Blackington. Hey, I have something to tell you.
About McKeever?
No. You know that little Apex company? Massachusetts. We put them into bankruptcy yesterday.
Splendid, Jessica.
What's the Apex company?
Apex Electric Clock Company, Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I found out we were taking a trimming from some little clock manufacturer up in New England. Remember?
Yeah.
Well, we aren't taking it from now on.
We buy them out?
Not me. I stole a leaf from McKeever's book, forced him out, undersold them by 50%, and kept on doing it until they cried uncle. So yesterday, under they went.
Marvelous, Jessica.
Well, it'll look good in the annual report.
I don't know. I don't think we should have done that.
Free enterprise, Al.
Just the same, I can't forget that we were a small company once.
Now for finish with something I want to take up.
I just don't like the idea of putting small companies out of business.
You know something else? Do turn that thing off when you talk, so you can hear what you're going to say.
Okay, it's off. Now what is it?
Well, it's that pheasant woman.
Who?
Pheasant, partridge, whatever her name is.
What about her? It's only been 3 weeks. We can't let her go yet.
I'll tell you what about her. She's costing us $962 a week for first-class postage. That's what about her.
See what I mean?
Oh, for God's sake, Jessica.
How do we know she's costing us all that postage?
I know because I got the figures from the mailroom. She's writing letters to stockholders. Hundreds of them.
To the stockholders?
What's she's doing that for?
Some idea of Jack's. I don't
Now
know.
hold on a second, Clifford. I did not tell her to write any letters to the stockholders. I said that if any should come in from the stockholders.
Well, she's not waiting for them to come in.
What's in the letters? Did you read them?
Certainly I read them. Some of them. I couldn't read them all.
What'd she say?
Oh, things like, how are you? And have they got any suggestions? And stuff like that.
Sounds harmless.
What do we want with their suggestions? Damn fool idea in the first place putting her in there. I must say, Jack, I didn't like the way you handled her that day at the meeting.
We've been over this a dozen times. She's here now, and she has to stay another 3 weeks. Do you want her to show up at that meeting again and embrace Hal?
All I know is I don't like her writing letters to the stockholders. It's not safe.
Well, what can we do about it? We cannot fire her.
I'll tell you what we can do about it. We can take her secretary away from her. Let her write 600 letters a day by hand and see how she likes it.
Something the matter, Miss Larrier?
I'm wearing General Products bobby pins.
Well, that's no good at all. Very disappointed, Miss Larrier. Tell Mr. Wilcox I didn't like it one bit.
Yes, Mr. Blessington.
Sending a girl in here dressed like that? What the hell's he thinking of? Lunch?
Every day, Cinderella punched the time clock and ate watercress sandwiches in the company cafeteria. Now one day, she was working away in her office, her little head filled with happy thoughts and wondering whether Prince Charming and the Golden Coach were ever going to come along. And as she bubbled and toiled, trying to turn an honest buck, she dreamed about the time when the prince would fit the glass slipper onto her dainty foot. Little did she think, as she sat there, that what she was going to get was not a glass slipper, but a good, swift boot.
Salt Lake City, Utah. Dear Mrs. Avery, paragraph. I was so delighted that you answered my letter of last week. Period. Yes, comma, I have been in Salt Lake City twice, once in 1986 and once in 1995. Period. It is a beautiful city. Period. I am so pleased that you are satisfied with the way General Products is being managed. Period. I can assure you that earnings will be much higher for the next period. Period. However, comma, dear Mrs. Avery, comma, if you ever have a suggestion to offer your company, I am always at the above address. Period. I hope to hear from you again, comma, real soon. Period. I remain your new friend, and so forth, etc., etc. Colonel William B. Butler, 17 Ashton, Ashton Street, Natchez, Mississippi. My dear Colonel, paragraph, stop. Miss Shotgraven, use form letter for men number 5 here. And in the second paragraph, insert quote. I have not had the pleasure of visiting your beautiful and romantic city since 1991. Period. However, comma, its memory is still with me, and I agree with you completely that Natchez is indeed the jewel of the swamps.
Form letter for women, number 8. 1,000 of them.
Thank you, dear. It's nice to have them on hand.
Lucky I got there when I did. The printing department was ready to close.
This early?
It's 4:45, Mrs. Partridge.
My, time seems to fly. So much work. We are doing a good job, aren't we, Miss Shopgraven?
I think so.
I think so too.
Afternoon, Mrs. Partridge.
Hello, Mar.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jenkins.
You must have directed strays come in. Thought I'd deliver them myself.
That's very kind of you, Mar.
Service, that's all. How about a dinner tomorrow night?
All right.
And after that, we have to go to the IMAX. They're putting in a new screen that's twice as wide as a theater.
Well, next time I'm up around 53rd Street, I'm certainly going to stop in and compliment that little hairdresser.
I passed Mr. Snell's secretary in the hall. She gave me a memo for you.
Thank you, dear. Oh,
Mrs. Partridge?
they're taking you away from me, Miss Shopgraven.
What?
Mr. Snell, he says there's a retrenchment policy, and you have to leave. As of the close of this business day. That means now.
But I don't want to leave you, Mrs. Partridge.
What'll I do? I don't know how to use the computer. I don't know where the printing department is, or where they keep the postage stamps.
Perhaps I could drop in during my lunch hour, Mrs. Partridge.
You're a very lovable young lady, and staunch too. But no, this will all have to end now.
I don't know what to say.
They don't want me here. They don't want me here at all.
Mrs. Partridge, I'd just like you to know that every moment I've worked for you, it's been so nice.
Miss Shopgraven, before you go, could you type one little note for me? Just make it a memo. From Laura Partridge to Mr. Clifford Snell. Until now, I have enjoyed working for the General Products Corporation. As my usefulness has come to an end, please accept my resignation. Will you type that out now, dear?
No, Mrs. Partridge. This is a large organization. Sit here. Collect your paycheck every week.
It's getting late. Would you mind?
Would you like me to drop it in Mr. Snell's box for you?
Would you?
Mrs. Partridge,
What is it, dear?
goodbye.
Thank you for everything, Amelia. Miss Shopgraven! Miss Shopgraven!
Yes, Mrs. Partridge?
Did you read the company newspaper this morning?
Yes, I did.
Didn't it say that General Products had eliminated one of its competitors? Some company that makes clocks or something up in Pittsfield?
I believe so.
Then listen to this. It's from Pittsfield. I received your letter and am writing to you right away because the strangest thing has happened. My husband has just lost his job after working for the same company for 22 years. It is one of our best companies here, the Apex Electric Clock Company. And the funny thing is that General Products bought the company just 2 years ago, and now everyone is saying that it was them that drove it out of business. Why would they do that to their own company is what I want to know. Please answer as soon as possible.
I don't understand.
Neither do I. Wonder if it's true. Switchboard, give me long distance information. It does seem a funny thing to do, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Putting one of their own companies out of business? Massachusetts. Want the telephone number of Mrs. Henry Brooks, 141 Oak Street. I'll pay for the call myself. This is Laura Partridge.
Don't bother checking, Mrs. Partridge. It's right here in our own directory. Clark's Pendulum, General Products Division. Moline, Illinois, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, San Bernardino, California. Clark's Electric, Apex Electric Car Company, Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Cancel the call, switchboard.
What do you make of it?
It's their own company. Putting it out of business since their own company? My, what I can do with this at the next stockholders meeting. Mr. Snell's office, please. What did you do with my resignation?
I put it in Mr. Snell's box.
Get it back.
Well, I can't. It's locked.
Break it open. I want to talk to Mr. Snell. Take an axe to it if you want to. I guarantee he won't say a word. Big geniuses. Gone for the day. Well, it's a little early for him to be waltzing out. Yes, you can give him a message. What does he mean by taking away my secretary? This is Mrs. Partridge. Yes, that's what I said. And tell him I want to see him first thing in the morning. And have those other 3 dummies in there, too. Goodbye.
Corporation directors tore their hair and gnashed their teeth, which did not make them any less ugly, as you can imagine. But no matter how much they squirmed, one simple little fact remained. Cinderella had them right where she wanted them.
Now, Miss Shopgraven comes back to work as my secretary. Agreed?
Yes, Mrs. Partridge.
And she gets a $60 a week raise. Is that agreed, Mr. Snell?
Yes, Mrs. Partridge.
And I can mail all the letters I want to. That's agreed too?
Yes, Mrs. Partridge.
Now, what else was there?
Mrs. Partridge, do you mind if I smoke?
Mr. Blessington, have you seen the reports of secondhand smoke in the workplace? Do you really want to jeopardize the health and safety of your fellow board members? Really, Mr. Blessington, have some grapes instead. Oh, by the way, I do hope you're comfortable in those new chairs.
Oh, yes, indeed. Are you comfortable in that chair, Mrs. Partridge?
Oh, very comfortable. Thank you.
McKeever.
This must be our call. Do you mind, Mrs. Partridge?
Not at all.
Yeah, I'm ready. Washington. It's McKeever, all right.
Nice nothing. Give him the facts.
Hi, Ed. Gosh, it's good to hear your voice again. How are you? That's great. Oh, just sitting around the boardroom. Jack, Cliff, Jessica, and, no, I finished the chair. Working on the table right now. Early American.
Oh, let me talk to him. Hey, how you doing, Ed? Oh, that's splendid. I saw you on the cover of Time last week. Looked very impressive, I thought.
Well, for God's sake, give it to me. McKeever, this is close now. Look, we can't understand why we haven't been awarded any government contracts for this year. Well, I'm aware that there's no law that we have to get them. Don't you think if you looked into it personally? Well, I'm aware it's up to the government, but if you're... Hello? Hello? I don't know. Why don't you talk about it?
There's gratitude for you after that $500,000 bonus we gave him.
He didn't take it.
What?
He didn't take it.
Where is it?
It's in the treasury.
What treasury?
Ours, of course. Whose did you think?
I was afraid you meant the United States Treasury.
I mean, I can understand us being cautious, but not towards a single government contract just because you used to head the company.
But I don't think that's fair.
Of course it isn't fair.
What do I write to my stockholders about the dividend?
Write them that because there's a stubborn old goat up in Washington, the dividend will be less. That's all.
But I've already written to them that the dividend will be higher.
Tell them to blame Ed McKeever, not us.
I just can't do it. Those poor stockholders. The little ones, I mean.
The little ones don't lose as much as the big ones.
Look, we're sorry about the little stockholders, Mrs. Partridge, but they gotta take it as it comes. And it's not coming.
But suppose I talked to Mr. McKeever and told him about the little stockholders. You see, I promised them.
I'm afraid it wouldn't do any good, Mrs. Partridge.
No.
Mrs. Partridge is mighty good at talking.
And she does represent the small stockholders. She's one herself.
He might just listen to her.
Get him back on the phone.
That will do no good. She has to go talk to him face to face.
Exactly the way she's done with us.
Could you, Mrs. Partridge? Would you go down to Washington and tell McKeever about the little stockholders?
Just the little ones, mind you.
Don't mention the big ones.
Well, if you think I could do any good.
Certainly you could do good. Take some of their letters along.
Yes. Yes, when would you want me to go?
The sooner, the better.
Tomorrow. Can you go tomorrow?
I guess so. What time?
Let's see, there's an 8:30 flight to Washington. Would you mind one morning at 8:30?
Just one morning.
But what do I do?
Just tell him about the little stockholders.
The littler, the better.
Yes, I know. But
Let's see, we'll have a flight waiting for you. First class, everything.
when I get to Washington.
Linwood Airport, it'll take you right to him. All you have to do is talk.
Just the same way you did here.
Remember the little stockholders?
I'll do it.
That's great.
And thank you, Mrs. Partridge.
You're welcome.
I can't tell you how grateful we all are.
Oh, that's all right. Well, I won't see you again then before I leave. Goodbye. 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 I'll just tell him it isn't fair.
To the little stockholders.
And make them listen to you.
And don't you worry about a thing. Any of you. I've played Washington before.
Prince Charming was shorter than the average prince and about 4 stone overweight. But he also had over $30 million, which helped to make him a little more charming, as you can imagine. Right now, the prince had the entire United States government on his neck. And it was well known that the Pentagon alone was over 400 million tons.
McKeever. Clarence. What the hell happened to South America? Yeah, I know it's down there, but what's happening? What about those cruisers sent down there? Now, what do you mean, what cruisers? Cruisers I've been yelling about for 6 months. Well, I want a meeting. All the bureau chiefs. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Well, fly him in. I want him here. McKeever. What? no Kamalikoff. How should I know? Just, Moscow, Russia ought to reach him. Call me forever. McKeever. No, I can't give you the data on data. The data on NATO. The data on NATO. Miss Logan! Miss Logan! McKeever! No! We can't christen any more ships with champagne. Use seltzer. We're trying to balance the budget. Oh! Send her in. Whew.
How do you do?
How do you do? Now, I'll do all the talking. We gotta make this quick, because any minute that phone's going, it's gonna be the damn Senate wanting me to come over and answer some questions. The Senate, Mrs.
Partridge. Mr. Blessington said.
Yes, Jack Blessington's when you're coming. The Senate, Mrs. Partridge. Driving me crazy. Absolutely crazy. I'm in there every day, it seems. Just settling down here, trying to work, getting the stuff out, and bang! The Senate wants me to come over and answer some questions. What I'm doing. What I'm not doing. Why? A senator, Mrs. Partridge, is the only man in God's green earth who's allowed to talk forever without knowing what he's talking about. Nobody can stop him. Nobody. I've been there for hours, days, weeks.
Well,
McKeever. No, the French can't have it. Now, I know why you're here, Mrs. Partridge. I know just what you're after. The answer's no.
but
Remember, this isn't business down here. Not like business at all. I've made a discovery in Washington. I'll tell you what it is. Honesty. There's a form of honesty, and I'm not used to it yet. Been in business all my life, and that can't change overnight, no, can it? Anyway, I'm starting to get the hang of it. In another month or so, I'll turn the trick. Because if you're not honest down here, they catch you, and it ain't get held. McKeever. Yeah, okay for the Eskimos. So the answer is no, Mrs. Partridge. No contracts or general products. Because if I give them, the Senate will be on my neck, and I've had about all I can stand.
you know, I sort of thought you'd be a big silent man. You're big, but you're not silent.
I've got nothing to be silent about.
Now, why don't you sit down behind your desk and just try to be silent? It'll be good for you. Go on, try it. Fine. I don't know you anywhere. You look just like your bus downstairs in the lobby.
That doesn't mean Stonewall Jackson.
Oh, not here. Downstairs in General Products.
Oh? There's a bust of me in the General Products building?
Yes. Didn't you know? It's very good, too.
A statue, eh? I didn't have to go and do a thing like that. How big is it?
Oh, it's big.
Whereabouts is it?
Right across from the elevators. So it's the first thing you see coming in and going out.
Yeah?
And on dark days, there's a light that shines down from the ceiling, right on your head.
Sort of a halo.
Now, don't tell me they forgot to write to you about it.
I see a third of the mail that comes in. There's no time. And if I do get even a minute, the damn Senate steps in.
Now,
What's the matter?
you mustn't even think about the damn Senate. That's what gets you all worked up.
How can I keep from thinking about it when...
It just occurred to me. Are you Taurus the Bull?
How's that?
I'm Leo the Lion. I was born on July 25th. What's your birthday?
April 7th.
Oh, you're Aries the Ram. No wonder you're successful in business. J.P. Morgan was a ram, too.
I don't think I follow you, Mrs. Partridge.
I have a hobby. Horoscopes.
Horoscopes? Really? Can you tell me my fortune?
Heavens, no. That sort of thing is silly. But the zodiac, it may not always be accurate, but you'd be surprised how often. Well, let's take you, for example. You're a regular ram. I could see how you did all those things with General Products, building it up to such a big company.
Tell me, Mrs. Partridge, how long have you been with the company?
Not long.
What company were you with before that?
Oh, I wasn't with the company before. I was on the stage.
The stage? You mean an actress?
46 productions.
Ah, you don't say. You know, I always had the idea that I'd like to be an actor.
Oh, I'm glad you didn't. It's a terrible business.
Always kind of fascinated me. David Merrick, Shakespeare. Did you ever do Shakespeare, Mrs. Parker?
A little bit. Not much.
Must have been wonderful.
I never did care much for Shakespeare. It was so tiring. You never get to sit down unless you're a king.
I used to recite a lot when I was a boy. All kinds of things. Then, I don't know. Something happened. All of a sudden I was a businessman.
You're lucky, Mr. McKeever. Almost nobody makes a living in the theater anymore.
Still, would have been fun. People used to think I was pretty good. Well, for an amateur. Used to do recitations, you know, Friday afternoons after school. Had one recitation. Used to applaud like anything after I finished.
The applause is very nice, but the rest of it...
Then, Professor Sleep. Oh, that was our elocution teacher. He had me do it in front of the parents and everybody at the end of the term. Put in the paper. Real nice guy. Spoke with real fire, it said, real fire.
That's a good notice.
Spartacus to the gladiators.
What?
Well, that was the name of it. Spartacus to the gladiators.
Oh,
You know, I still remember it.
really? Well, that happens. Something you learned when you were young, by all your life.
You call me chief! Say, you wouldn't do me a big favor and listen to it, would you? Tell me what you really think.
I'd love to.
Mind, you don't like to say so.
Oh, I will. Whenever I go backstage, somebody's...
Yes, hell, I'm going to be an actor now. Be foolish at my age. Wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Well, I have done this for years.
I know.
Not since I was a boy. Spartacus to the gladiators. You call me chief, and you do well to call me chief, who for 12 long years has met in the arena every form of man and beast that the broad empire of Rome could furnish, but has not yet lowered his arm. And yet I was not always thus, the savage chief of still more savage men. My ancestors came from old Sparta and settled among the vine-clad hills and citron groves of Syracusa. My early life ran quiet as the brook in which I sported. And when at noon I would gather the sheep beneath the shade to play upon my shepherd flute. There was a friend, the son of a neighbor who joined me in my pastime. And when in the evening, after the sheep were folded and we were seated beneath the myrtle which girded our cottage, my grandsire, an old man, was telling stories of Marathon and how a little band of Spartans in the fire of the mountains had withstood a whole army. I knew not then what war was, but my cheeks burned and I grasped the knees of that of venerable men until my mother bade me go to rest and think no more of savage wars. That night, the Romans landed on our coast. I saw the bleeding body of my father cast among the blazing rafters of her dwelling. Today, I killed a manly ring. And when I broke his helmet clasp, behold, he was my boyhood friend. He smiled faintly, gasped, and died. That same sweet smile that I had marked when an adventurous boyhood we would scale the lofty cliff to pluck the first ripe grapes and bear it home. I, amid the dust of the arena, that I begged the friend that I might bear away the body to burn on funeral pyre. But the praetor drew back as though I were pollution and sternly said, "Let the carry-on rot."
There are no noblemen, but Romans.
Oh, I'm awfully glad you didn't try to be an actor, Mr. McKeever.
You are?
Yes, because...
McKeever? Oh, good morning, Senator. I'm fine, and how are you? That's great. By any chance, did you get the report I sent you? Well, just between me and you, what you think of it? Before your committee. But I was there yesterday and twice last week. Very well, Senator. Tomorrow morning. Copy of all contract. 9 a.m. I'll be there. Well, there you have it. Cancel everything for the damn Senate. How they expect a man to get anything done. Miss Logan! We have to keep running those committee moves all the time. Miss Logan! We copy of every letter, every memorandum, every contract. I'm up before the damn Senate tomorrow morning. They expect a man to get anything done. Senate.
Why do you do it?
Do what?
Why don't you refuse?
Refuse? It's the damn Senate!
Then why don't you quit?
Quit.
Just quit. Walk out and don't come back. You don't have to do this, Mr. McKeever. Not if it's going to do this to you.
That's so. I don't.
Besides, they need you back at General Products. I didn't want to come right out and say so, but those other men are terrible. They're going to ruin the company.
Ruin the company?
There won't be any dividends left at all.
Miss Logan. Mrs. Parker. Would you like to have lunch with me and talk some more about this?
I'd be glad to.
Miss Logan, I'm going out to lunch. I'll be back in an hour. 2 hours. I'll be back in 2 hours. Now, Mrs. Partridge, where would you like to eat? Anywhere you say.
You know where I've heard a lot about? Where I'd love to go? The Senate restaurant.
Oh my God.
The 6 o'clock news roundup, Bill Parker reporting.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here are the headlines. A resignation in Washington, a tornado in Texas, and a lady with 14 children in Alaska sells her cow. Now let's have a look at the top story today. Today in the nation's capital, Edward L. McKeever handed in his resignation. Members of both parties were stunned. Senate leaders in particular are at a loss to explain why McKeever decided to leave Washington. Mr. McKeever departed from the nation's capital late this afternoon by airplane. He was accompanied by an unidentified friend.
A very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is Connie Brookfield, bringing the 11 o'clock news right in to your own living room. And the big news tonight still centers about the sudden move made earlier today. A move out of Washington, out of government. One high administration source was quoted as saying that McKeever's abrupt departure from Washington is causing grave inconveniences to certain parties in certain parties. Meanwhile, McKeever has been undergoing inconveniences of his own. A severe thunderstorm over the New York metropolitan area forced his plane down in Philadelphia a few hours ago. Told of the furor his action had caused in Washington, McKeever refused to comment. He was accompanied by a woman who was reported to be a business associate.
And now, Estelle Evans and the High Noon News Bulletins, a compendium of events of local, national, and international importance to you and your family. Miss Evans.
Good afternoon, ladies. I'll have the weather, the fashions, and the shopping for you in just a moment. But first, I'd like to tell you of the latest developments out of the front page story that I know will interest you just as much as it fascinates me. Edward L. McKeever. You all know who he is. He resigned from that big job in Washington yesterday. Well, this morning, Mr. McKeever arrived in his New York office from Philadelphia. And this is what will interest you, ladies. Still accompanying him was the mystery woman who traveled with him from Washington late last night. Questioned by reporters, she steadfastly refused to reveal her identity. But, despite the Mr. Woman's denial, informed circles in Washington are busy speculating this morning on the strange circumstances of Mr. McKeever's resignation. Did he break with the administration? Or did this millionaire widower leave his high post because of a woman? In other words, ladies, is Edward McKeever a modern-day Mark Antony captivated by a wily and seductive Cleopatra?
All right, that's enough pictures. Now, I want to run this the way the president runs his conferences. Statement first, questions afterwards.
Excuse me, Mr. McKeever, Sullivan, AP.
Questions afterwards, so.
Turner here, Mr. McKeever. UP.
Matheson, CNN. We'd like
I know what you want. Now, get your microphones ready. I'm only going to say this once. Here's your statement. Ready? Political differences had no bearing on my resignation. My confidence in the administration's policies has always
Sorry,
been...
Mr. McKeever, that's not the story we're after.
What about the woman?
Yeah, who's the woman?
Nobody. Nobody at all.
Nobody at all.
Just an old friend.
Where is she? What's her name?
Her name is Mrs. Laura Partridge, and she works for the company.
Yes,
She came to see me on business. That's all.
absolutely all.
Where is she? Can we see her?
Of course. We have nothing to conceal. Always one proper with the press, aren't you?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Come in, Mrs. Partridge.
Right over there, lady.
Do you mind? Not at all.
Thank you, lady.
How do you do, Mrs. Partridge? How do you do? Work for the company, Mrs. Partridge?
Yes, she does.
Yes, I do.
Doing what?
She's in charge
Of stockholder relations.
I'm in charge of stockholder relations.
In charge of stockholder relations.
Why did you go see Mr. McKeever?
She came to see me on business. That's all.
I went to see him on business. And you know why?
No.
Goodness, no. I hadn't met him until yesterday.
You left Washington yesterday afternoon.
Yes, she did.
Yes, I did. You got back here this morning?
Yes, she did.
Yes, I did.
Where'd you spend the night? Yes, where did you spend the night?
Why, we...
We were at the Hotel Barclay in Philadelphia.
On separate floors.
Separate floors.
Separate floors.
On separate floors.
Up here. Have you seen the papers?
No, Jessica, we have not seen the papers. For the past 24 hours, we've been living in a tree.
Well, what are we going to do about it? It's dreadful.
It's not as bad for you as it is for me. You're not married.
I don't see what that's got to do with it.
Well, if you were married to Mrs. Blessington, you damn well see. According to her, I took that woman to Philadelphia.
Well, at choir practice last night, the whole choir was buzzing about it, right in the middle of that Handel oratorio.
What is there to buzz about? It has nothing to do with general products.
She works for us, doesn't she? The Partridge woman.
A lot of women work for us. Maybe they've all been to Philadelphia.
Just the same, it's not good for the company. We make things for the home, don't forget. Have you seen the faxes? Have you heard about the phone calls?
I've got an idea. Why don't we take a big ad, full page in every paper in the country?
What will we say then?
Well, I haven't gotten that far yet.
Take a general product jet next time you take Joe to Philadelphia.
Well, it wouldn't cost anything. It would come off taxes. And maybe we could get that Hotel Barclay in Philadelphia to pay part of it.
We've got to get rid of her. That's all.
We can't do that. It will only make things look worse.
But if we don't get rid of her, it looks as though we're afraid of her.
Well, aren't we?
Well, I hope you're satisfied. You got us into a hell of a spot.
This wasn't any idea of mine, Clifford. Whenever I go to Philadelphia, I always stay at the Bellevue Strap.
I don't give a damn about Philadelphia. It's her bringing McKeever back that's gonna make trouble.
You don't think he's gonna want his old job back, do you?
I know this. He's going through the building right now, shaking hands with all the employees.
What's he doing that for?
Some habit he picked up in Washington. How should I know?
Oh, but if he comes back, he'll want to be chairman of the board. There goes my job.
And president of the company.
Lousy vice president. Back to the masses.
Now listen, if we stick together, we can freeze him out. We've got the votes, haven't we?
True enough.
Do you think we should?
We've got to do it. You want to keep your jobs, don't you? Your bonuses, your stock options.
Well, if you put it that way.
Then don't any of you weaken. McKeever's a hell of a talker.
What about the Partridge woman? God knows what she's going to do next.
Leave the woman to me.
Do you think you know how to handle the clip?
I know how to keep away from the stockholders meeting, and that's the main thing.
How?
Yes, how?
Well, while you've been reading your papers, I've been doing some thinking. There's one sure way to reach her. Astrology. Now here's the way this thing works. Once you're born, you're done for.
Well, I wouldn't say that the four uglies were getting greedy exactly, but they were not far from it. At the very least, they were beginning to feel their oats, and served with plenty of rich cream, they made a tasty dish. Yes, sir, they were in the saddle, and they thought nothing could stop them. But a few hundred years ago, a wise old philosopher once made a very wonderful remark, one that should always be remembered. He said, "Joe, you never can tell."
I'm sorry, Mrs. Partridge. It'll never happen again. Why not, darling? The phone has been ringing steadily. You've had a great many messages.
More? Those terrible headlines. Weren't they wonderful?
Time magazine called, and Newsweek, and the Star. I don't know what they wanted.
Pictures, probably. Send everyone who wants a picture to the Van Dam Studios. They took some lovely headshots of me a few years ago.
And several television producers, and a lot of agents. I don't know what they were agents for.
Flesh, dear. Just flesh.
I beg your pardon?
It's been a long time, Miss Shockraven, since they called me. Only it all comes a little too late. Don't let life go past you. Jump aboard it while you're young.
Oh, Mrs. Partridge, I only wish I could.
Why, Amelia, darling, what's the matter? Sit down here. Now, tell me what's wrong. Are you in trouble? Big trouble? Who's the man? Mark? Oh, it's all my fault. You were so unattractive with your hair. Now see what's happened. I suppose it wouldn't do any good to put it back. Have you told him?
Told him what?
About your condition.
What condition?
Oh, then you're not going to. I mean, you aren't.
Oh, Mrs. Partridge, no! How could you think such a thing?
Well, in my day, when a girl said she was in trouble, she was in trouble.
Mrs. Partridge, we can't afford to get married. He has to live with his mother and his sister, and I don't want to live with them.
It would be crowded, wouldn't it?
Good for you, Mrs. Partridge.
I'm sorry.
Is something the matter?
Cinders. Both eyes.
Mrs. Partridge, when is your birthday?
Oh, you don't have to get me a present, Mr. Snell.
Well, it so happens, Mrs. Partridge, the stockholders meeting has been moved to the 14th of the month. And on the 14th, Sagittarius will be in ascendancy for those born under the lion. You know what that means.
Oh, you're talking about my horoscope.
Yes, Mrs. Partridge, it'll be a very bad day for you to go out.
You don't expect me to go by that damn nonsense.
You don't believe in astrology, Mrs. Partridge?
Not for stockholders' meetings.
I see. Mrs. Partridge, I wonder if you realize the position in which you have placed us.
I'm sorry.
You were sent to Washington He revised Mr. McKeever's attitude toward this company. Instead, he brought him back here to New York.
But he was so unhappy there. He was a nervous wreck. You should have seen him.
We want to protect you, Mrs. Partridge. We're very fond of you here at General Products.
Oh, Mr. Snell.
So we don't want you to feel like you must attend the forthcoming stockholders meeting. You'd be stared at, whispered about. We don't want you to feel uncomfortable.
Oh, I'd like it.
So we're prepared to buy your stock in this company. You're a good businesswoman. What would you say to $5,000? That's 17 points over the market value.
17? That's my lucky number. I signed for the best part I ever had on the 17th. It was in 1987, and the play ran for 17 months.
That's great. And now, if you'll just sign this form, signing your stock over to us, you can bring in your certificate on Monday. Here's your check for $5,000.
Oh, I'm going to want more than that if I'm going to be bribed, Mr. Snell.
Bribed? Who said anything about being bribed?
You did. Why, when I showed this to the other stockholders...
Show us the stockholders. May I remind you of no witnesses.
Hope I'm not interrupting business.
Oh, good afternoon, Mr. McKeever.
Excuse me, old man.
Old man. In Alaska, I would have killed a man for that.
Alaska? The Klondike? Did you ever see Belle of the Klondike?
Didn't see any women up there. Went there for gold. Dug for it with my bare hands.
Mercy. Did you get any?
Nah. Fellows with shovels were ahead of me. That's where I learned my first lesson. The little man doesn't stand a chance. Trip was worth it though. At Robert W.'s service. Bunch of boas were whooping it up in the Malamute.
Yes. And after Alaska?
Johannesburg. Diamonds. But the more I knocked around, the more I realized. Can't get ahead being a little fellow. Gotta be big. So I went to work as a common seaman. Lasted the master 72 hours. Typhoon.
Gracious.
Landed in Frisco, started my own business.
At last.
6 months later, they broke me. The trust?
Wasn't that mean of them?
No. It was business. Big business. So I made up my mind then and there. Looked around for the biggest outfit I could find and went to work at the bottom of the pile.
The slag pile. I remember.
Old man. I should have fired him 15 years ago when I caught him taking paper clips home. So what happened? Out, they're in. Why? Because I sold my stock. It's a damn setup for you again.
You've got to do something, Mr. McKeever.
You know, when I left for D.C., they gave me a key of the building. It's about all I have left.
There won't be any dividends left at all. With them running things. Think of the stockholders.
Are you a stockholder, Mr. Parker?
10 shares.
Uh-huh. Do you want my help?
Oh, yes, Mr. McKeever.
You've got it. Now, to get them out, take over this company again.
That's it.
First time was easy. Those people are smart. So I put them in there. There's gotta be a way. All's fair and war in business, and by God, this is both.
I only wish I could help.
Maybe you can.
I'll do anything, Mr. McKeever.
Tell me, when they sent you to Washington,
Yes.
they did send you to Washington, didn't they?
Yes.
They bought your plane ticket. They had it met at the airport. And they delivered it in my office.
Yes.
To get contracts. Contracts for General Products.
Yes.
Then we got them. If you'll testify to that in court.
Of course.
We got them. There just has to be a law against that, Mrs. Partridge. A federal law.
I know. The Mann Act.
And now, the 6 o'clock news bulletins. Bill Parker reporting.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First, a look at the top story of the day. The United States government versus General Products Incorporated, whose 4 top officers are charged with violation of the Smith-Wadsworth Anti-Lobbying Act. The case came to trial this morning in the federal courthouse in New York's Foley Square. Mrs. Laura Partridge, a key witness for the government, was accompanied to the courthouse by businessman Edward L. McKeever, the former Washington department head of the government charged was pressured by General Products officers.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your 11 o'clock radio news summary of the events of the day. In New York, at 4:30 this afternoon, the government's case against one of the country's largest corporations came to an abrupt end. A federal jury refused to indict the corporation's directors, who testified that they had not sent Mrs. Laura Partridge, the government's chief witness, to Washington, and had never for a moment considered doing so. Instead, the judge severely criticized Mrs. Partridge, declaring that as a stockholder in General Products, she stood to profit by influencing a government employee in its favor. Upon leaving the courthouse, Mrs. Partridge was followed to the subway by a hooting and jeering crowd that showered her with a barrage of eggs and vegetables.
So Cinderella went away from there, closely followed by representatives of the Times, the Tribune, the News, Newsday, the Post, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and Women's Wear Daily. And this should teach everyone a great lesson. Whenever you see a lawyer, anywhere, run like hell.
So, under the circumstances, Mrs. Partridge, I'm afraid that's the way it's going to have to be.
You're angry because I testified for the other side. That's why you're discharging me.
Why not at all, Mrs. Partridge?
Not at all.
Nothing could be further from our minds.
Hasn't my work been satisfactory?
Yes, indeed, very much so.
Letters are coming in every day. Hundreds of them.
We know that, Mrs. Partridge.
If it's another retrenchment move, I'd be willing to take a slight cut.
I'm afraid not.
Say $100, just because I like the work.
No, Mrs. Partridge, no.
How about 200? That would be equity minimum in Buffalo.
Mrs. Partridge, the cashier has your check waiting for you, terminating your employment as of this afternoon. And now if you'll excuse us.
Of course. No one has anything else to say? Any of you? Well, I do. The way you're running things, I wouldn't be surprised if this company closes on Saturday night.
What does she mean by that?
You know, what's the difference what she says? There's nothing she can do anymore.
I'm kind of worried about it.
She can still show up at that meeting, mess up everything.
Not a chance. After the way the judge laced into her, nobody would listen to a word she said. No, sir, we are in the clear. Forget about that Grosselman. We're going to have our biggest year.
We are?
You bet we are. With McKeever out of Washington, we're starting any government contracts again.
And are we soaking them? Do you remember those 10 million filing cabinets we got stuck with last year?
Yes.
Well, we pressed them down flat and sold them to the government for fences.
What does the government want with all those fences?
Aliens. You can't let them run around, can you?
Yes, sir. Our biggest year. And no excess profits tax.
Why not?
Because there isn't any anymore.
Oh, I thought maybe we just weren't going to pay it.
Great. Anybody want a drink?
I wish you would bring a bottle of your own in here someday. My expense account is beginning to look outrageous.
$10,155 last month. I checked it myself.
Who told you to stick your nose into my business?
Well, I am the treasury. Say, we didn't drink all that whiskey, did we?
Well, it wasn't just whiskey. There were other things. 4:30. Would you mind taking your drinks and drifting into one of the other offices?
Not going to work, are we, Jack?
Miss Boyle. Oh, I forgot. Get my home. Tell Mrs. Blessington I have to stay in town tonight.
Well, here's the general products. And to us.
Are you sure nothing could happen? I'm still a little nervous.
Relax, Jessica. You probably got her checking us out of the building by now. The general products.
General Products.
General Products. Oh, how you doing, Ed?
Oh, hey, Ed.
On your feet, damn it, all of you.
Now look here, Mr.
What the
McKeever.
hell's the matter with you, Ed?
Relax, McKeever. You'll get ulcers.
I don't get ulcers like you.
What kind of grandstand play is this?
I want you to give that woman her job
My
back.
dear fellow, is that all? The way you steamed in here, some of you thought it was something important.
It's important to me.
May I ask why?
Because she loves that job, and I want her to have it back.
Of course, Ed.
We'd like to help you, McKeever, but it puts us in a rather untenable position. You see, severance papers sent through a half hour ago, and you know your own policy, never rescind an order.
I don't give a damn about details. I want her back.
Do you mean to tell me that the great Ed McKeever came in here just to ask for an old lady's job?
I know what's eating you. The trial. That wasn't her doing. It was all mine.
Then how do you have the gall to come in here and ask a favor?
You know, something what he says, Ed, when you come to think of it.
Fair's fair. You know, Ed.
I'm just telling you to give the woman her job back.
You're not telling us anything.
He's right, Ed. He's sensible. We've got control of the four of us.
For old time's sake, Ed, I don't like seeing you make a fool of yourself.
Take my advice, Ed. Don't make an issue of it.
Are you trying to tell me the financial setup of my own company?
Our company.
My mistake.
Times have changed, McKeever, and you're getting a little old.
Why, you miserable.
Now hold on a second, Ed. Clifford's worked very hard for this company. We all have. It's all we've got on our minds day and night.
Honest to God, Jack, aren't you ever coming? Mr. Blessington, I didn't realize you had a meeting. I'm so sorry.
Day and night, huh, Jack?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Ruthie, the girl in the cafeteria that made you chicken croquettes. The girl from shipping would come up here and keep you informed about what kind of twine we're using. Or your secretary. Got pains from sitting all day, so you had to let her rest on your couch. Really? Clifford, I don't know what Sill's talking about. Did I ever tell you about the night he got stuck in the transit trying to sneak into my office? Never did find out what you after that last night.
What was it? There's nothing here for you anymore, McKeever. You're through. So why don't you get the hell out?
"39 years. I need the key to get out.
Well, things look pretty black for Cinderella and Prince Charming. I can tell you that. Not only was the glass slipper lost, it was broken in 1,000 pieces. You probably think that virtue is not going to be rewarded, but don't give up yet, because if Cinderella does not wind up happy, we'll give all of you your money back, and there is a fat chance of that happening.
Vanity Fair. Goodness, Mr. McKeever! Imagine you walking in on me like this. This place must look a mess. I'm packed.
I know, and I'm burning mad.
Nonsense. You mustn't be. I'm glad.
Glad you didn't get your job back?
Glad that I was here. Because if I hadn't been, I would have never learned about second breakfasts and things like that. Oh well, there's no business like business.
Now my idea, Gilly. Oh, still here. My idea is to put shelves in here, wall to wall, floor to ceiling.
Floor to ceiling. Very good.
We're gonna use this room for dead storage. You see, we're putting in a whole new system, modern. Because once something is over and through with McKeever, better get out of the way. And say, why don't we go down to the boiler room? I bet we can find a spot for that bus down there.
I wish I knew about 7 new words.
You'll beat them, Mr. McKeever. You're airy the ram. You're strong, forceful, determined.
You know, Mrs. Partridge, these past few weeks I've gotten to know her pretty well. I just hope we won't laugh at what I'm about to say.
Oh, I never laugh at you, Mr. McKeever. Oh, you mean that recitation. That was the material, not you.
Yes. Anyhow, dropping in here every couple days the way I've been doing, I've gotten a chance to read some of those letters he sent out to the stockholders. I also read some of the response he got back from them. I'll come right to the point, Mrs. Partridge. Going back into business. What do you think about joining me?
Oh, I'm not a businesswoman, Mr. McKeever. Anyhow, not a real one. I haven't done so well here at General Products.
Forget about General Products. They're big, but there's room for more than one big show in this town.
Oh, there certainly is. Why, when the Hippodrome...
Yes. So what do you say, Mrs. Partridge? We can sound a whole new note in industry.
I don't know.
Edward L. McKeever and Company.
What?
Well, that's what we call it. Edward L. McKeever and Company.
Well, I never was a star, but in my last 3 productions, couldn't it be Edward L. McKeever with Laura Partridge?
Anything you say. McKeever and Partridge.
Equal billing. That's very generous. But I don't know.
Oh, Leanne, before we go any further, there's something you ought to know.
What is it, Mr. McKeever?
I never would have said anything had it come up.
You can tell me anything.
All right. Here it is. I've only got about $30 million. But I have a group of men behind me who'll come in on anything if I give the word.
You mean you've got backers, too?
I guess that's what you call them.
Why, with all that money, what would you think of starting a little repertory theater?
Theater?
Repertory. That means doing a different play every night. Oh, just the good ones, you understand. I think it's the very thing New York needs.
A theater, eh? Might be something of that, too. Tell me. Would you act in it?
Oh, I could. Maybe some of the old Sarah Bernhardt plays. They had wonderful women's parts in them.
Yes. And, what were the men's parts like in those shows?
On second thought, Mr. McKeever, I don't think New York is ready for repertory.
I wouldn't expect to play big parts. At least not at first.
No, Mr. McKeever. I think we'd better forget that kind of partnership.
And you're sure you don't want to go into business with me?
You're being very kind. But I think it's a little late for me to start studying new lines.
Is there anything I can do for you? Anything at all? What are you going to do?
Oh, I've made arrangements. I'm going into the Actors' Equity Home.
Actors' Home? I can let you do that, Mrs. Partridge.
Oh, it's not like it sounds. You're perfectly independent there. And there's other actors and actresses, and lots of talk about show business. I'm signing over my 10 shares of stock to them, but the dividends will be mine as long as I live.
I see.
And if you'd like to, you could come up and see me, Mr. McKeever. Englewood isn't a very long drive, with that big car of yours and the chauffeur. You will drive up and see me, won't you, Mr. McKeever?
You bet.
My, that will impress those old character women, all right. Well, I better be getting these things together. All of these people that have been writing to me, I sort of feel they've become friends. So I'm taking some of their letters home to answer.
Well, where did you get this?
It must have come with a letter. Yes. Enclosed, please find photograph of Harold. It was taken last summer in the backyard next to the garage. I'm also enclosing my proxy for the next stockholders meeting. Is it a proxy?
Yes, it is.
I generally don't bother sending them back, but since you and I have been corresponding, I feel much closer to the company. So I signed your name in the blank space because you're the only one at General Products that I am acquainted with. 30 shares.
Here's another one. Dear Mrs. Partridge, I'm writing this to you because I feel that you have my best interests at heart, and I know that you'll cast my vote for the best man there. Enclose 50 shares.
I don't know what to do with these, Mr. McKeever. Do you?
Well, I made it.
Mark Jenkins, what's happened to you?
He's been fired, that's what happened. This time with Mr. Snell.
Made him out cold if you must know.
Oh, you did? That's too bad.
But why?
He didn't want me to make this delivery.
Oh, Mark, now what are we going to do?
I tell you, Mrs. Partridge, ever since I've been in the mail, we've never had a flood like this.
It's another one of those proxy papers. Mercy, 200 shares.
55 shares.
150.
Mark, close the door.
300 shares. Mark, lock the door.
There you are. See for yourself. You and that damn letter writing you put her up to.
Now, hold on a second, Mrs. Partridge. What is the meaning of this?
Of course I'm sure. Mrs. Partridge, you're not working for General Products anymore. These are company property.
Goodness, I don't want any trouble.
Pardon me, gentlemen. These belong to Mrs. Partridge. Her name is on every one.
That doesn't matter. A mere handful. We've got more than that in the office.
No, you haven't, Mr. Snell. There are 5,000 letters here and twice as many in the mailroom. All you have is about 300.
Shut up, Jenkins. You've been discharged too.
So this is where you are.
Why weren't we told about this?
Oh, shut up, Jessica.
5,000 letters. Each averaging 200 shares.
Aren't they the darlingest people?
Mrs. Partridge, you don't realize it yet, but you're in control of this entire company.
I am.
You certainly are.
But that's purely technical, you understand.
Oh, goodness, I understand. I've learned about business. But this just means one thing. The four of you, you're all fired.
And so, a few days later, arm in arm with Prince Charming, Cinderella made another trip downtown. Only this time, not in the subway, not in a coach drawn by 6 white horses, but in a solid gold Cadillac, driven by a solid gold chauffeur.
Respectfully submitted at this, the 60th annual meeting of General Products Incorporated. Signed, Laura Partridge, Vice President, Secretary, and Treasurer.
We've all heard the report of the Vice President, Secretary, and Treasurer. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor, please say aye.
voting 170 million shares by proxy, I say aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Hi. May I ask a question? Oh no, that's how I got mine started. The meeting